Okay, everybody ready? I'm going to turn off my phone. You know how that goes. Thanks for inviting me. It's always great to spend time with clubs. I think this is number 280, 281 or 2 that I've done since February of 20. I just love sharing some of the science of this great hobby, and I don't think it's being done very well by the leaders of our wonderful hobby. We need to share some other ideas and some of the sciences, so that's what we're going to do tonight. So I get started here. I'm going to do a couple of things. First of all, I'm going to take you into a couple of minutes of where I started and how it's allowed me to do all of the things I'm doing. I started out when I was 12 years old. My parents bought me a B3 Hammond organ. We're talking about a very expensive thing, and they were not wealthy people, but they thought I should have that because I'd been playing accordion a couple years before. But in 1956, a couple years later, I became the substitute organist at the Fox Theater under Stan Can. And this was an amazing thing. And why I take time to tell you, it's where I learned to listen. Hearing is a physical process. Everybody hears. Listening is a mental process. You dive in, listen for all the nuances, especially distortions and phasing problems. And how I learned to do that, the organ had about 3,500 pipes from 1 inch to 32 foot. And they had to all be voiced and tuned because the organ hadn't been played in 20 years. And that's exactly why Stan Can hired me to not just only play it, but to help get it going. And I'm still doing that today. Not at the Fox, but to other theaters. But that same year in the fall, I got a license, a ham radio license. One of my high school chums, K9DTQ, had gotten his license, and his father was the band director of the grade school. And of course, I'd been in his bands and stuff before, but his son bought a Harvey Wells, and so did I. And I bought an SX99 and a VHF 152 converter. Now, why did I get that? Because that was the right at the start of the biggest sunspot cycle in the history. And I was a technician for 17 years. I didn't need to go anywhere else. I mean, we were just having incredible fun on 6 meters. Nothing like today. And the other thing you'll notice, that little blue box over to the left with a meter on it. I had only been licensed just a few weeks, and I saw this article in QST, and I built this. I went over to Walter Ash and bought all the parts. You can do things like that in those days. And I put it together with a 2E26. By golly, it worked. And I was amazed. And that started my whole movement of building. Well, a little later in my life, the Fox Theater called me again, and they said, "Hey, we're throwing out some of our old speaker systems. They've been here since 1932. Western Electric had had built them in the theater, but they were replacing them. So I got a truck and I went and got those two you see on the right. Those are 16-foot folded horns by Harry Olson. Harry Olson's the guy that designed a lot of things for RCA and Western Electric. His most famous is the pill microphone, if you remember the old Johnny Carson pill and so on. In fact, there's one right over my shoulder, if you'll see that. That's our replication of that. But Harry Olson's the guy that brought that to us and a lot of other things. Well, of course, we're hams. We don't throw anything away. Are you kidding? So I got those, and a couple of months later, I bought the other four you see on the left from another theater. And we started doing some sound reinforcement around the St. Louis area. Crown was quite a thing in those days, but you'll notice on the lower right, that's what Crown built for hi-fi use in your home. You put that on your walnut shelves. but we wanted to take them on the road, and so they licensed us to build a cabinet for it. Had a 600 to 600 ohm balanced transformer into a 3-pin XLR, that kind of stuff. That Crown didn't do. That's why they licensed me. But you can notice on the bottom there, we used to use a lot of Crowns, along with a lot of other things. I actually started off with Macintosh, but we were building larger and larger system for different people. That curved one you see on the top, that was very easy to roll in and out of a theater. We were playing smaller theaters with Jeff Beck. And Jeff was going to go on a tour, and he was going to do smaller homes. Not he wasn't going to do the big arenas in this tour. So that's what we built for Jeff. There's a couple of views of it. But Heil sound became pretty prominent in those days. We built our own amplifiers, a 400 watt. Down in the lower corner, they were modular. So if you had a problem during a show, you didn't have to turn it all off and wait for 2 weeks to get it fixed, because when you bought that, we got a little suitcase, and it had all spare modules and parts and everything else. And so you could fix it in about 10 minutes. And there you'll see a whole stack of them. Those that's over a kilowatt easily. They're 400 watt a piece, so you can. We were doing some great things in those days, and nobody else was. But Heil Sound become the king back in the late '60s, during the '70s. A lot of the groups. This one was a group that bought all of that. They could come to Marissa, Illinois, my home, and they could buy everything. So cables and all that. When they'd leave out, they could go do a show. We also worked with a lot of groups during our career. Many, many groups that all of you, I'm sure, know a few of. But one of the great things that happened to me, we were asked to do this tour of a thing, and it was started in Ohio, a new group, and they said we need to have a big loud system. Okay, and so who was that? It was Joe Walsh, and of course the James Gang, and so we had a lot of fun with Joe. We found out after we were just a couple of weeks into the thing, a couple of shows into the tour, we were the guys that were ham radio operators. And so Joe and I really grew up together on the stages. And of course, from there on, we've been really great friends. But one of the things that we built, and I forgot to get it down here. Joe had played prior to this on his album. He did that album in Nashville, and it was in a studio of Bob Drake and Pete Drake. Pete was a great steel guitar player, and they did that album with that's the first Barnstorm album, and it was in this wonderful place. They had a great studio. Well, as he was there, he noticed in the corner there was this little box. Pete was quite a gadget freak, and he noticed this little box, and this little box had a speaker in it and a little piece of hose coming out of it. He took the output of his guitar amp and plugged it into that little speaker, and bingo, it was the original talk box. It wasn't very loud, but it sufficed for what they needed. Now, that was about 1971, I think, that we did that first one. But I'm going to show you something I don't show this to all. I don't get into all of this with the groups because we run short of time. There was a guy. He was a ham, Alvino Ray, and he married one of the King's sisters, and he had his backed up the King's sisters. So, what are you going to do? He was a gadget freak. 1939. You recognize this? You will when I show you what I do with it. They were two carbon microphone capsules, and it went on the throat of the World War II pilots. You couldn't use a microphone. Oh, goodness. Because if you did, you couldn't hear anything. So they adapted this, the Army. And instead of plugging this into an input, Pete, I'm all right, not Pete earlier, Alvino plugged the output of his guitar amp. And he put this on his wife's throat behind a curtain with a microphone. And when he played his guitar, it would modulate her throat and her singing to his guitar. So when people ask me, were you the first one to do a talk box? No. It was in 1939 by another ham radio operator. And so we just went on through things. It was just unbelievable, some of the things that were happening in those early days. But we were setting up, a lot of times we would build some of the equipment for the tours in our plant in Marissa. We had a 7,000 square foot building, and we had truck docks and all that because we could load trucks in and easy. Well, Joe after we caught up on our James gang, a few years later, he called me. He says, "Hey, I need to set this tour up." So we set all the instruments up for Rocky Mountain Way and for that particular tour. That was the big song. And what happened was Joe, he kind of left the whole thing to us in the plant. And one of his lead guys, who was really his tour director, he came to Marissa, and we started working on what was going to happen. Now, he told me about this deal with the talk box thing, but he said it's not very loud. It was fine for recording, but he said, what are we going to do? Well, I knew what I was going to do. I grabbed a 100-watt driver from a compression horn, and I built this little case. This one happened to be signed by Joe. And the driver screwed into there, and the hose dropped in front of it. Bingo, we were ready to go. Well, what was so much fun about it is that we were able to put all this together because we had a place we could rehearse. And so actually, Joe actually heard the first talk box there in the plant, and off we went on the tour for that second band called Barnstorm. And it was really something. I mean, we had so much fun putting all that together. And Joe, being a ham, of course, just about anything I wanted to do, Joe would be ready to go, and we just had a lot of fun doing those kind of things. But we've spent a lot of time on ham radio together, and that station down in the right lower, that's one of his rooms in his house that has the central electronic stuff. That's the Queen Mary on the bottom. And then that's W1AW, and that's the first show with the PR20. Joe also helps me with a lot of beta testing for things. So that's how it all got started, and the talk box then was making its way. Well, we were doing Humble Pie. That was a big band out of England. I Ain't Got No Doctor was their big song, and many of you probably remember that. Well, their lead guitarist was Peter Frampton. And after about a year over here, the management thought they should take and move Peter into another group. And so they did. And what happened there was we were able to build on that with him and a couple of the guys that he really respected. He loved Bobby Tench and some of those guys. But these are some of the pictures of early Peter and later. There's a picture of Penny McCall. She lived in Marissa. We had several of the mostly road crews that lived in Marissa, renting some houses, and they could work at our plant and put all their stuff together. If they needed anything, hey, we'd build it. It was a great thing, and it happened so many times. But she called me one day. She said, "Hey, I left Marissa and I got a new guy. I'm with Peter Frampton now." And I'm going, "Oh, yeah, okay." She said, "Well, I need a Christmas present for Peter. Don't send me a guitar. Send me something." He's got a lot of guitars. So, of course, you know what I said. All right, okay. Bob Heil, Bob Heil, Bob Heil. He's the only guy that can make it talk. Joe kind of makes guttural sounds, and many of the others. Bon Jovi was another one, and you all know that. The signature song for many groups was the Heil Talk Box in it. At Humble Pie, we had a couple in there, but they weren't so well known, so that didn't kick off. But there you were with Frampton Comes Alive. That album sold more than any other album. It was a double set. And so everybody was in tune with what was going on with the talk box. And I was of course, very thrilled. And from there, it went really great with so many of the great artists. And so I was happy that everybody was on the tour with it. But from there, it went crazy. We were building a lot of big systems, larger than most people, but it was all because of my able to hear, I was able to tune things a little differently. And so much of that went down, and yet we were the leaders when it came to making things happen. So Heil sound became pretty predominant in those years. Well, I need to take a break here. I got to get my computer over here. My other computer is not cooperating. Hey, let's do this. You got any questions that I want to take real quick? We could do that while I'm setting this other computer up. Any questions? No?
Can you hear us okay?
Oh, sure.
Okay. While you're getting that together, this is Bob. Certainly appreciate you joining us tonight. I'll tell you, though, I was thinking today that I never would have imagined I would be talking to the guy who invented the talk box, because as a young teen, I was just fascinated when I heard Peter Frampton do that. So that was really cool back then. Still is.
Yeah, a lot of guys used the talk box, and it was all done right there in Marissa. And I was being a ham radio operator. I could do a lot of things, and I think that's really what made our company grow so fast. Is I wasn't afraid to tackle anything. You know, most of us aren't. But that was a real top of the heap. Any other questions? No. Oh my.
Hang on, just what is your favorite microphone overall?
that's hard to say. They're like children. You love them all.
No.
But I like the PR 781. You talking about for ham radio? Yes, the
Yeah.
PR 781. There's nothing like it. Nothing
What
touches it.
what about for vocals?
For vocals, well, that was an interesting thing. Joe Walsh was sitting in his kitchen one day and he said, "Hey, we lived in California about 6 years. He had some problems, and so we had a second home out there to kind of help him along." And he said, "I need you to build me a better microphone." I said, "What are you talking about? You guys have been using these things forever. This thing. Look what happened to my audio. I didn't touch anything." He said, "Well, here's the big deal." He says, I got to be right here. And of course, every vocalist you see with one of these, this is where it is. Don't, for gosh sakes, move it off because you lost it. He said, "Don't make one that you don't have to do that." And he said, "These things are always muffled. We got to EQ the heck out of them." Okay. So I did this. Listen what happened to my articulation. We're going to get into that in just a little bit. This is the PR22. But watch this. I can move it 180 degrees and it's still there. And actually, I did this particular one for right after Joe. We were on tour with Paul Rogers in Bad Company, and he said, "You need to build me a better microphone." And so this was it. And they all started loving the 22, and that's today is a very predominant microphone. But everybody's in love with the Shure. Well, I got news for you. That thing was designed 65 years ago, and it certainly needed to be rebuilt. And they rebuilt it. But what did they do? They built it in China. And don't get me started. Don't get me started. But we were doing all kinds of other things. But the PR22 is really good. And, of course, we'll get in a little bit about the PR40, stuff like that. But here's a picture of that first talk box. That first talk box was we had to have some kind of an enclosure. The first one we just had a hose stuck in the driver, and we were in the fiberglass business because we built lots of speakers in fiberglass. We had our own fiberglass shop, and so a lot of our speakers. You see many of them there at the Who. Those are monitors for all of them, but we were quite something into that fiberglass. Why is they were building metal horns, JBL and some of them. Well, I didn't like that because they rang. They rang like a bell. And I said, well, we got to do something about this. And so we started building them in fiberglass, and it really worked. So I thought, well, we'll just build that little enclosure for the talk box. And that was the very first talk box, was in that fiberglass enclosure. In fact, that's the one I sent. I built 5 of them. One went to Joe, and I sent another one to Peter and 2 other guys around here, and then I still have one of them over at the plant. But anyway, that's the history of the talk box. But we made a lot of friends in the business, especially managers, because in those days, we're talking the late 60s, early 70s, none of the stuff got there at the same time. Some of it was all destroyed, because one guy'd have a Volkswagen van, another guy'd have a pickup truck, and they wouldn't get there at the same time. I said, I'm going to put an end to this, because if the show didn't go on, and sometimes it didn't because of that, I didn't get paid for all of my guys and hotel bills and travel. So I said, okay, here's what we're going to do. We were the first company to lease a 40-foot semi and a driver, a licensed driver. I bought an old Greyhound bus, and we put 11 beds in there so we could sleep 11 guys. And it was really great. the many tours that we did. You name them, and we were out there doing so many, and still in the later years. So this was fun stuff for me. But you have to understand one thing: you're looking at a guy that has never tasted or any of that stuff, never had anything to smoke, nor did I ever do any kind of pills or drugs. And I'm just about reaching 82, and I'm still really healthy, and I'm okay. And I still have fun, even though you take that stuff. I don't have to take that stuff. After we got a lot of press on our tour stuff, I get a call one day from a manager who said, "You the guys got that big loud PA?" I said, "I do." He said, "Well, I got this band I'm starting to manage, and I'm a lawyer, and I don't know a lot, but I know that you guys had a big sound system with the Who." I said, "That is correct." He said, "Well, I got this new little band, and I need somebody that can really help them because they're really loud." No problem. Anybody know who that is? Nobody usually guesses. That is ZZ Top on their first show outdoors at a park without beards. Oh boy, we're still with them, and so sad that we've lost the bass player. Dusty was really something. And a little piece of trivia about that band, if you don't know it: the drummer is, well, let's go here. First, you got, everybody knows Billy Gibbons. Then Frank Beard was their bass player. And the drummer, I messed that up. Dusty Rhodes. The drummer happens to be Frank Beard. And he didn't have a beard, even to this day. I always thought that funny. I love those guys. I'm so sad to lose Dusty. He was a great musician and a great friend. And Billy is wonderful. But we did a lot of stuff with the Who, a lot of stuff. And after we were on the road for about 3 years, Pete called me one day and he said, "You got to come over here and help me." "What are we going to do?" He said, "Well, I got an idea." It's 1973. Okay. So I got in a TWA airplane, flew to London, sat down in his studio. Unbelievable studio. What you see here, up there where he's leaning on that chair, that's a little home organ, a Lowry $900 home organ. In the second picture above, he's got it coupled to his synthesizer. And that's what he did. Who's Next? Baba O'Reilly, you know, the da 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 da. That was done right there. Then in the lower pictures, he'd do backtrack tapes that we'd have to play in headphones for Keith Moon, the drummer, to keep up and so on, and because some of the timing was a little tough. But anyway, he said, "Hey, Heil, quad sound is big right now. You think you could build the PA that we could move Roger's voice in around an arena?" No, it's not in my vocabulary. And so we did. And it was really a stroke of luck, like so many of my things that's happened to me. It just happened at the right time. And that right time was the fact that we were working with a sister company in England to build a righteous console. We didn't have righteous consoles because all of these things that I was telling you about, like my first major artist was Jimi Hendrix at Kiel Auditorium. And we did a whole bunch of other groups in those days. We did a lot of country groups that would come through, and that's what we did them on. Now think about that. That bottom one you see, that particular mixer it's just a mixer. There's no big equalization factors or any of that. And so we needed a mixer. We, meaning the industry, needed a mixer. And we were just beginning to work on that when I visited Pete. And I said, yeah, we can have this. And so IES, our sister company in England, International Entertainment Services, and Heil Sound got our heads together. If they would have like Emerson Lake over there and they'd want to come to America, they didn't have to bring all the big speaker cabinets because all of our pins and our plugs and our cables, they were all the same. And so we shared a lot of that when I'd take the Who back over there, so that kind of thing. But it's, just quite amazing all of this stuff that happened in those days. And we we still have great relationships with all of them. But that's how all this stuff got started, and I'm really happy that we were able to help them. We were the first ones to do monitors. You see, if you have a microphone and you put a speaker underneath your feet so you can hear the other guys in the group, and you have to do that, what's going to happen? Well, you know what's going to happen. They're going to feed back. Playing with the Grateful Dead, Garcia and I, if you ever see an early picture, you'll see two microphones taped together on top of the stand. One of those fed the monitor, the other one fed the system out there. But this one was out of phase, so it didn't hear that one. And so that really got us rocking because we were the first sound company that did monitors, big monitors. We're looking at about 400 watts, and you don't even see all of it behind or beside John Entwistle, the bass player. And Pete, you can see one of the radial horns. That was a 250 watt horn, not more than about 5 feet from his head. And Mooney, the drummer, we had one behind him, and we also had headphones on him. But those are all things that ham radio brought to me. Phasing. We also did special monitors for Billy Graham because people were starting to hear about Heil Sound, and we were doing all kinds of different things for different artists. I enjoyed being with Billy for about 2 years. That was really great. But Heil Sound was building a lot of things. We were building all kinds of mixers and consoles. Our mixers were very special. They were modular. So if you had a gig and one of the preamps went dead, when you bought it, we gave you right there, that little suitcase, a parts kit. Had a spare screwdriver in it because nobody had a Phillips screwdriver in those days, I guess. Had spare fuse and all that. But anyway, in a matter of 5 minutes, 10 minutes, you could have your amplifier back on the road. That was remarkable. But we were building things like crazy. We had 35 people in our building, and just building all kinds of amplifiers and you name it. And we got into building things for festivals, big festivals. This one, it was supposed to have 10,000 people. It ended up with 100,000. That was fun. And this is the Mississippi River Festival. We did that 6 nights a week for 7 years, and that was just wonderful. And the system, we took care of all of it. But they had every artist in the world came through there. There's another festival, but I got kind of tired of the whole business because I started seeing that, and I didn't care for that, but more and more. But so many. This is just a few of the groups that we did, and I wrote the book because so many people would come to me and ask, "How'd you learn that?" And well, ham radio. No, and like, where'd you learn to do all this? Ham radio. And I found out that nobody had a book on it. How to do concert sound. So I wrote it. Very, very thrilled. Back in, I think we did that in '75, and it's out of print by now. But we had all kinds of things going on. So many of our people that we talked about. I spent 25 years in St. Louis on television and radio. This is Channel 2. I also was on Channel 5 for a while. And we were at KMOX The monster 50,000 watt clear channel was on there for 25 years, and we were had a little thing we called high tech Heil on Wednesday nights, because in 1974 when I started this, there were no cell phones, there were no CDs, there wasn't much of anything but a cassette player, and CBS would send me to the large electronic shows, and I'd bring all these gadgets home. It was just a wonderful time of my life. I also was in the satellite business. I got hooked up with Bob Cooper. Uh, Bob was he was a real Renaissance man. He lived in Oklahoma City, and when after I was on the air, just a couple of years, I got a call from a guy, and he said, "Hey, this is Bob Drake." I'm going, "Bob Drake, whoa." Of the Drake Company. He said, "I understand you have a kilowatt and a half on single sideband on 6 and 2 meters." And I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "Well, we'd like to have you visit our club. We do an annual club meeting here, and we ask for technical papers. So bring all the papers and all the things. In those days, they were slides. And we want to know how you did that." Well, I did it because of the engineer at KMOX. I was on the air for just a few weeks in that station, and I heard this K0DGE. His signal was so distorted, but I finally figured it out. And then I hit the BFO button. Oh my goodness. It was that single sideband stuff on 6 meters, 1957. He was one of the very first. And I'd ask him, "Would you help me build one of those?" No, I can't do that. "But I'll teach you how." And he did. I'd play the theater in St. Louis. That was 50 miles. I'd go up there, drive up there and play the organ for 8 to 10 minutes. And then the movie would be for a couple of hours. Then I'd have to play another 8 or 10 minutes. So I had time. And so I'd go down to KMOX. And the first time he gave me his address, I didn't know who he was. I knew he was K0DGE Larry. And I rolled up in front of this address, and it's KMOX radio. What am I doing now? He took me under his wing. He said, "I'm not going to build that, but I'm going to teach you how." And he did. We went across the street to Walter Ash Radio, bought a Central Electronics 10B kit. I put that together. And he had a laundry list. Larry gave me a chassis and a 6U8 and transformers and potentiometers and all the stuff we needed, capacitor. And I put together a 36 megacycle oscillator. He had me buy a grid dip meter because I had to wind the coils in an oscillator. So you put 36 megs injected into the 10B that was on 14 megs. What do you have? 6 meters. Hello. And so that really got me going. And I needed a better antenna. So local dealer, it was a Motorola dealer. I mean, I'm only 18 years old. I didn't know much about all this, but he and another friend of mine who was in the contracting business, K9EBA, they put up a 110-foot Roan, and I bought a Telerex 36-foot long, 6-meter antenna, and I had a J-beam for 2 meters. Well, that Telerex was very interesting. It didn't have radials all horizontal or vertical. It was called the spiral array, if any of you were around in those days. That was really cool because when you hear a signal fade, you probably think that it's bouncing somewhere else, whatever. A lot of it, your signal is changing polarity all the time. And when it gets to vertical, it could be down 15 or 20 dB. But a lot of this phasing is caused because of, a lot of the signal loss is caused by the phasing problem. But the spiral array took care of some of that. That worked pretty good. I was working people all over the globe because I had a really good signal with all this. I also, my parents were so thrilled. Oh my gosh, they were so thrilled and so loving and so helpful. They didn't care what I did because they didn't have to pay for this. I was making a lot of money as a kid with my organ careers, at two of them. And that's another 50-foot roan on the other side of the house where I had a 36-foot long, 2-meter Yagis. These were all Telerexes. One was horizontal and one was vertical. And I brought the leads down into the shack, and I could, by inserting different delay lines, I could cause the signal to do all kinds of wonderful things. Well, I needed more power. So I bought a 6-2 Thunderbolt kit, put that together with the guidance of Larry Burrows. You can see the central electronics up there above my head. There was also a Seneca I built. I was a building fool the first 4 or 5 years. Oh man, I was going nuts. But I only had to play a few hours a day, so I had a lot of time, and it all worked great. Well, I go to the meeting I told you a little bit ago. Bob Drake called me, and I go to their meeting. I had a friend of mine flew me out there in his Bonanza, and they said, well, we really would like to have you here. So, well, we can do that. So we fly out to the Biltmore Hotel. They had taken all of the furniture out of one of the floors. They had the Collins room, they had the Drake room, Central Electronics, Telerex, Mosley, Hallicrafters, Johnson. They were all there. And to me, that was incredible because they were like superstars to me. I was reading in the magazine about Bill Halligan and about Wes Shum and about Carl Mosley. All these great guys, they were there. And I couldn't believe that I was a part of it. But I had tapes that I played and showed them, and they were absolutely mesmerized because I was one of the first 10. I didn't know that. They referenced that. They went to the league and found out K9EID was one of the first 10 with a kilowatt on single sideband on 6 and 2 meters. Where was this place? Of course it was. It was Dayton, Ohio. It was one of the first conventions. They held quite a few in the late 50s in the Biltmore downtown. But in 1964, they moved out to Hara Arena. And so that's kind of the story of all of that stuff. But I got tired of playing, and I opened a little music shop in Marissa. I was going to sell Hammond organs. I got a Hammond organ franchise, luckily, and selling Zenith TVs. Well, okay. I didn't know where I was going. Well, what happened is kids would come into me and they'd say, wait a minute, you fixed something and you fixed my amp? I can. They all discovered there was this guy with a soldering iron, and they'd bring these amplifiers. And I'd never seen a guitar amp before then. I turned it upside down, and what was it? Holy smokes, it's a pair of 6L6s and a 5U4. Well, that's what's in my Harvey Wells. I knew that really well. And Harvey Wells is sitting right over there. I should put a camera on it sometime. Anyway, I still use it every morning. And so I was able to fix it. I knew what he did. He tried to make it go to 12 and it only went to 10. So he would have wiped out the finals and the screen resistors. And I had a junk box and I had it all there. In about 15 minutes, he was back on the air. Well, that got proliferated all over the Midwest. There was this guy. Now, that first guy spread the word. But we were having people come to us like REO Speedwagon, Michael McDonald, Danny Fogelberg, but they weren't known by that. Michael was because that was his name. But REO, they weren't a band. These kids were all in high school yet. They were coming down with their gear so I could fix it or do something with it at EO Music. It became the capital, rock and roll capital of the United States, and I'm not making that up. At any one day, you could see the Grateful Dead's bus. You could see a truckload of humble pie, or just all kinds of people would come to me, and it was a very popular place, and we were thrilled to be able to continue making all of these great things. And my organ career continued also after I got out of the music business and all of that. I started playing the organ at the Holiday Inn. It was the largest Holiday Inn in the chain in St. Louis. There were 600 rooms on one floor. But I built a pipe organ in that restaurant, and so it was pretty crazy. People from all over the country would come, busloads, because they could come and stay all night at the Holiday Inn. But that's what got me here, and after so much of the thing with the dead and so on, the Billboard magazine wrote an article about helping the Grateful Dead because they didn't need their all of their stuff got confiscated. If you know about that story, they came into New Orleans one night, and the guy that owned their gear and ran all their stuff, Owsley, he was the inventor of LSD. If they were on probation, he was on probation. Wasn't supposed to be out of the state of California, so they figured they'd sneak in. This Midwesterners, they don't know about us. So they went to New Orleans, St. Louis, Ohio, and New Jersey. Well, they did that first night, and the FBI and the see, this is a true story. The FBI and the DEA sat in the back row. When they finished, the band came on to St. Louis. They didn't have cell phones in that day. And so, now, see you 3 o'clock tomorrow at the Fox. Yeah, right. So the band gets there. Where's Owsley? Well, he got confiscated that night. He and the truck, and the FBI and the DEA took them out. Where they went to prison or jail, I'm sorry. So that's what happened there. And there was a guy at the concert that we did for them that night, because when they came to St. Louis, they didn't have anything, and that's really put Heil Sound on the top deck, because we had a system big enough that they could play with great authority, because they had never played through anything like that. And that all took place at the Fox Theater, and the rest is history. There was a guy there that night. He wrote an article called "The Night Rock and Roll Sound Was Born." There's a close-up of the stage after we got going. He wrote an article and put it in Billboard, and you can go to Google and you can put in there, "The Night Rock and Roll Sound Was Born," and it'll give you the whole story. But we had so much fun in those days helping these guys. And as I said, I wasn't into all their drug stuff, but that's okay. I had a soldering iron, and we became good friends with so many of them. But I got out of that business. I sold my systems to a company in Holland, Michigan. They bought half of the sound system. The other half, Pete Townsend bought it, and took it to England to give to some of that lesser group, lesser with that PA, but that's what he did. But I just loved all that stuff. But when I got out of it, I got into the business of satellite television. I touched on it earlier. The guy I talked to, we did moon bounce with that big 128 element guy. We did that with that antenna, and we were talking to Bob Cooper, W5KHT. He was the father of home satellite. 1962, when he and I were doing the moon bounce from Marissa, Illinois to Oklahoma City, he was holding classes in his yard on Saturday to teach anybody that wanted to show up, but mostly they were TV dealers and ham radio operators, taught how to find the satellite, how to build an LNA, low noise amplifier, because you could get the dishes, gosh, you could get those from surplus houses. That was easy. So that's what started me into it. I became one of the majors in the country. I put in thousands of C-band dishes, and it was really fun. And we had a lot of things going on in Southern Illinois. I was a Thunderbird nut in those days, and I had a test dish. It would fold up like an umbrella, and I because you had to test all of these sites because sometimes 4 gig had interference from the telephone companies, so you'd have to test it before you could go put it in the ground. But I had a lot of fun. But one day I got a call from the Hubbard family. The Hubbard family, if you don't know about them, you should go research it. In Minneapolis, the grandfather was the first guy to do a remote radio show from a hot air balloon. He did a wedding, I believe it was. His son was the first television station. And if that's a piece of trivia, if you asked that and said, oh, was somebody in New York? No, it was Minneapolis with the Hubbard family. They bought the television thing out of the World's Fair a few years before that. But that got them all ramped up. What did the grandson do? He paid 60 mil and he bought the first license for K-band. So instead of it being 4 gig, it was 12 gig, which meant what? The dish could be 3 times smaller. Aha. But because he had that first license, he could put up the first and only satellite and move it around to find out where he wanted it. He got her dead south so he could cover both coasts. That's how that all works. He had me to be one of the 10 test stations. And I had a little 2-footer that you see there in my backyard. I put that in 1991. They sent me, and they would send me test shots. They'd call me on the phone, and then we'd give them all kinds of readings on the receivers we had. And so that all led to it. But in 1994, I became the guy that announced on ABC television from the floor of the CES show, Consumer Electronics, that big show in Las Vegas. We let everybody know it's here. We've been talking about it a lot. And therefore, I was the first dealer to sell them. That's the vice president of RCA, who was one of the partners in DirecTV. He came to Marissa, and we installed the very first one in a home. And that's my plant. And that day it was my showroom for my retail store. Now it's the front door of Heil Sound. There's several large warehouses behind that, but that really got us going. And I was on all kinds of media, Today Show, and so on and so on. We were building a lot of home theaters. And we're not talking about Best Buy things. We're talking $200,000 and $300,000 rooms. We were doing high def television in 1991 and 2 because Laserdisc you could do it with the projector was 20 grand, but who cares? We wanted to do it. Had real theater seats and did a lot of these. They were sports guys and bankers and lawyers. But it was just great fun, and I worked with Ray Dolby. That was kind of fun. I introduced his ProLogic receiver at one of the CES shows because we would set up. In fact, that is one of the displays at the CES show. We had about 20 seats in there. People would come in and experience. Notice I didn't say see. You could experience real home theater, and now we got to let them hear the very first of surround sound, and that was really great. And one of the guys that worked with me was Tomlinson Holman. Tomlinson Holman is from Illinois, and he helped me with one of the consoles we were building, but he went on to be the inventor of THX, Tomlinson Holman Experiment. And then I would go out to Skywalker Ranch, where he was working after he left me, and I'd teach some classes on home theater and what to do with it. We did more than just the stuff. People would come to me and say, "This is in my basement. Can you do something with it?" Well, yeah, I can. And back behind that curtain is what that crummy little room was. But another guy, what can you do with that? Can you do anything with that? Well, of course we can, and so on and so forth. Guy had a really large, tall fireplace. What am I going to do? Well, that's what I did, and so on and so on. I mean, this goes on and on and on. But it's one of those things that all of this stuff I learned from ham radio and still learning were there. But I got tired of the road. I thought I'd do something different. So I came back to radio. But I was very disappointed because when I came back to radio, it was terrible. A lot of distortion. There was a lot of big, tubby, bassy sounding things, and I'm going, what can we do here? Well, CQ field day, CQ field day, CQ field day. I said, is this what it's led to? Are you kidding me? But there were some that had it.
Whiskey Zero, Oscar Juliet Yankee.
And so I thought, aha, I have to do something. And so I did. I put together a little equalizer. That equalizer was a little two-band. Bass was at 160 hertz. The treble was at 2K. And I learned all of that from the scientist and all of the things that Paul Klipsch taught me. Because here's what happened. Paul Klipsch called me about that time, and he said, "Are you the guy that's got that kilowatt sound system?" And I said, "Yes, sir. But it happens to be 8,000. He laughed. "I got to come and see this," because he was an efficiency freak. So he flew his airplane up to Marissa, Illinois, and the next day, whoa, it was like a drunk meeting Jesus. Because I had no idea of what was going on and what he was talking about. He all day long, "Well, why are you doing this? Or how come you did it that way? Well, where'd you learn to do this?" Ham radio. "No, where'd you learn? What college?" I didn't go to college. I barely made it out of high school because I only went the required number of days. I had a calendar at the theater and would mark off the days. I didn't care about it. I wanted my diploma just to get out, which I did. Terrible grades. But I learned all this stuff from ham radio and voicing those pipes and building pipe organs. And Paul was amazed that I didn't go to college. So he took me down to his lab in Hope, Arkansas that night. And it was just a couple of days of unbelievable stuff. There you see him in front of one of his K-horns. That's made out of plexiglass. He did that just to show all the angles that are built in it. But it goes in the corner. That's why they call it a K-horn, a corner horn. Of course, for Klipsch also. If you've never experienced one, do if you ever get the chance. Notice I didn't say here. It was an angle like this, a 90-degree angle, the cabinet you just saw. You put it in the corner of your room and you bolt it to the wall so that this 8-foot and this 8-foot become the last 16-foot. That baby would do 15 cycles and not resonant. See, everything you hear today, and I say this with pretty much thought in what I'm saying, all of the low frequency you hear today are resultants. They're harmonics. If you ever experienced a true 15-cycle tone, you'll never forget it. It's amazing. But Paul had his lab in that, it was a telephone exchange building back in the days, and he acquired it when the telephone company got out. But he guided me to so many things in just a few days. I'd be writing all these things down. And one of the things, let me get this. one of the things that he gave me was really my education in audio. It was the Audio Cyclopedia by Howard Tremaine. It's 800 pages. You need to know something about audio, there's your Bible. And I use some of those pages and give them due respect, of course, when I did some of the things in my book. But it's all back to this listening as a mental process. Hearing, we just all hear, right? Okay, I hear it. But you got to dissect what you hear. Well, they put the telephone system together, had 2 wires from New Jersey out to California, and this was what they had promised. They were going to keep it level all the way out. Yeah. Well, about every 500 miles across America was a relay station to keep it all up. Well, when they got to California, this is what they heard. And they weren't too happy about it. What did I just do? I only turned down one control. The mid-range, which happened to be sitting at 2.5K. It's a parametric, so I can sweep it from 400 to 4,000. But as I put it back in, pay attention. Now listen. As I bring it back, there's 800, there's 1,000. The minute I hit 2,500, you're going to go, whoa, I'm still coming. There's 1,500. You ready? There it is. I didn't turn down the bass. I didn't do anything but increase 2.5K. Let me take it away again. Take a listen now. I'm going to take it away sharply. And unfortunately, so many things today, there it is flat. So many things today sound like this, including your radio. Well, I wanted to do something. I'm going, I can't let this lie. After I played around with some of these things with Paul, I'm going, whoa. And so he got me to listening and reading about the telephone system and about their problem. What were they going to do? I mean, this was a big deal. The telephone, they had a lot of money on this, man. They staked the country on it. Well, they didn't have that, and so they brought in 4,000 scientists. Yes, Bell Lab had these scientists. You can go check me out on this. And these were the guys that could really tell you about listening. But what are they going to do? Well, 2 of the lead guys, Dr. Fletcher and Dr. Munson, they came up with something that has just been the Bible for any of us in the audio world. I hope that some of you would know about the Fletcher-Munson curve. That's a curve of your ear. I don't hear it like that. Every human has this particular situation. As you get up to 110 dB at the top, it's almost flat. But down here where you normally listen at a 20 or 30 dB level, look, it's like a ride at Disneyland. And that was what was wrong. They needed to do something because what they determined was this. That's a 3K wide chart. And they learned that between 2 and 3K is where the sweet spot is. As you're looking at that, I'm going to do it again. I'm going to take that 2.5 out. You like that? I bet you don't. Because the F and the S and the P and the B, let's put it back in. There's 2.5 again. The S, the P, the F. They all have great great articulation, and that is what they discovered. That was the problem. So how are they going to fix it? They didn't have equalization, so they did it with high pass and low pass filters. I put both of them in here. They only needed a high pass. You go into that capacitor, so much, depending on the size of it, and depending on the size of the resistor, that took the base to ground. Most of the highs went straight on through. That was a high pass. There's a low pass. It passes lows, so it goes through the resistor. You want to knock out the highs, certain capacitor. They all have formulas to do this. But here's this kid, man. This kid worked for RCA in the late 20s. And his job was to go in and fix the motion picture theaters. Because in that time, 1929, 1930, they all had these nice big theater organs. The one like the one sitting in front of me. But in 1930, it was over because they had sound, but it wasn't sounding very good. So John Volkman, look how young he was, he thought, I can fix this. Working for RCA, he came up with this idea of different values of high-pass filters. And what he could do there was put it in series with the film projector and the audio amp, and bingo, he was ready to go. Well, this is the hard thing for you to believe. Equalization was not known about from 1929, 1930 to 1967. We didn't hear about equalization. And if you weren't around, you're probably thinking, oh, you're crazy. No. There was a little rise in 1950 or right after that for the hi-fi world. They had bass and treble, but they were real simple, not much depth to them. But that was the only other kind of equalization that we had. Well, I was home one day, and I got a call from a guy, and he said, hey, you're in the sound business, right? I said, yes. He said, I'm going to send you a picture. I want you to look at it. Call me back. So the next day or so, I got that picture. This is 1967. Longevin, they were the people that build the big studio mixers and stuff. Holy smokes, they came up with an equalizer. Look at that. You could select the frequencies and you could notch your... Oh, this was great. I said, yes, I want to buy a couple of those. Yeah, well, not so fast. He said, let's go around the corner here. He said, this is something we're developing, and you probably will like it. And to all of you, you're probably saying, oh, no big deal, isn't it? No one had seen anything like this. I'm going crazy. It's like, whoa, what happened here? So I wasn't finished. He took me around the corner and showed me their new mixer they were building. It wasn't a rotary mixer. Remember these guys. It's hard to mix on a rotary mixer. You can't see where all the controls are. So I bought a pair of those. I took all that back to Marissa, and they shipped in the compressor and limiter that you see with the 2 meters and the graphic equalizer. We were the first company to do that, and oh, buddy, that was the day. But as I said, I just got tired of the business and sold all my system. I'd been out for about 12, 13 years. And when I turned on that first day, I had a KWM2. I couldn't believe it. It's like, what happened to my audio? You heard what happened. It was like, whoa, all bassy and mushy. Well, along came that. And I wrote an article and I sent it to the league. They called me back and they said, this is a revelation. It's never been done that we can find in ham radio. So they published it in July of 1982, and it was 2 bands, 160 hertz on the low end, plus or minus 12 dB. And where's the other one? 2.5K, plus or minus 12 dB. Of course it was. Now, the article I wrote as a DIY article, and I wanted all of you to build it. But I made one mistake. I put my phone number in there. Oops. And I started getting calls. Well, I opened up a portion of that plant. It had been closed, but I had a lot of the material and stuff, so we could make printed circuit boards with all that. So I called in two of my best solder gals, and we were off and running, building the EQ200. And that was the very first product of Heil Sound into this industry. As you heard before, for, well over a decade and a half, we were doing a lot of things in the into the commercial and broadcast industry. But I got a call one day in 1999 from Dr. Inouye of ICOM, Inouye Communications. And he said, I'm thinking of new radio, and I'd like to have used your EQ200. I'm going, oh boy, because he had a picture of his, it was an IC781, if you remember that. It had a scope. That's the first one that ever had a scope in it. He had a picture with my EQ200 and my Goldline microphone. I'm going, whoa. I'm thinking of new radio line, and I want to use. And so, history is from the Pro 1, Pro 2, Pro 3, all the way through to the great little 705. Wow. I hope you guys and gals have one of these. You want to talk about toys and ham radio, this is it. This thing is amazing. It's a 7300 in a little 3-pound box, battery operated, rechargeable, but it's got 2 meters in D-Star also, so you can really go crazy. It's got my equalizer in it, and you can punch up all the menus just like you did on the 7300, and all the settings are there. There's the transmit EQ and the receive EQ. Away you go. All the modes, the EQ for the modes. It's all there, just like it is with the 7300. So that started the real predominant move of equalization in ham radio. And that's the 7610. Right there. They all have different looks, but they all tell you the same, minus the bass and plus the treble. That's all you got to do. I also was asked by Mr. Inouye to build a decent microphone because they don't build their own microphones. OEM companies do, put their name on it, and you've been fooled for years. Kenwood builds them. No. And I know because I've been in the plants, I know what's going on. A lot of people don't believe me. It's okay. Well, we built the proper microphone for an ICOM. ICOM's a very strange front end. It's very low gain, and so you have to treat it right. It won't work with a dynamic element very well. It needs an active element, and that's what we did here. That's why there's 8 volts down the mic line, so we can make that all happen. But then Dr. Hasegawa came to me a couple of Daytons after, came in my booth. We need to be up there. He's a big old guy. He says, we need to do it bigger. What are we talking about? EQ stuff. And so I said, yeah, we can do that. We could do a parametric. Yeah, that'd be good. Not so fast. What'd be the problem? Well, you see, with a shelving EQ like I did for the ICOMs, it's at 2 knobs. I set the frequencies. All you got to do is plus or minus. With a parametric, you have 3 filters and 9 controls, and you don't know where any of them are. Unless somebody helps you, and their graphics and they're terrible. So we came up with a great equalization system. It's a 3-band parametric meaning we can change the parameters of that filter. You look on the right side. I've fuzzed out all the left side. We don't care about all that. That tells you what they are. Here they are. Frequency, level, width. They're all that way, all three of them. The first one we're going to set at 200. And we're then going to set the level at -3 or 4. Notch out some of that bass. And you're going to set that audio bandwidth at 2 octaves. Just set it there. Don't worry about it. The next one, anywhere from about 600 to 900, there's a real boxy sound. And you can hear that if you do this to your ears and do that. Oh, here's a boxy sound, and you want to get rid of that. And you do that by going around 800, 900, even as low as 600. Minus that sucker out of there. What do you do with the top one? Of course you know. 2.5K plus 8. Yes. And we put it on our website. It's so easy to see. They also have 2 equalizers. The one down in red, that's if you use compression. You have to redo the whole thing. Well, I got a little note for you. Don't use compression. Why do you use it? Nobody has ever come to me and proved to me that it's worth it. It's worth your ego, maybe the meter flying, but it's distorted and it's crummy. And with the right microphone, using the right microphone, knowing how to talk in a microphone, and knowing what the EQ settings, you got all of it right there in front of you. Now, wait a minute, though. What are you talking about this? Use a microphone. What are you talking about? Well, I learned this from my audio encyclopedia and from it's a scientist. When you double the distance from the source, you lose 6 decibels. 6. So I hear a lot of people, and they doing this. They're back in their easy chair. Well, Heil, you're stupid. Just turn up the gain. Okay, I will. But now I sound like I'm in a roller rink. And this is a treated audio studio, so it really doesn't have a lot. But I bet in your ham shack you don't have a lot of acoustically treated walls that we do in this, because this was built for the organ and for my testing and all of that. Well, what do you mean? What I'm talking about is you never want to get more than 2 inches, ever, ever, ever. It's why I brought booms to this industry in 1985. We needed it because I started hearing guys back off from their mics. I thought, okay, we'll fix that. And so now, my gosh, we sell thousands of those things a month to the broadcast industry, the podcast industry, all kinds of people like that. But it all goes down to the fact that you have to learn about equalization and what it does. If you don't have an equalizer in your radio, like a 520 or an 820, whatever, great. All you have to do is go to Julius Jones. He's got a great one. And what did I do there? Notice I notch out, got 50s down, 100s down. I feather. We call that feathering up. You just don't go from one to the other. And then we got a little bitty notch, but not anything boosted. And we start coming back up to 2400 that he has. That's the perfect example. There's another equalizer, and this is kind of sad. This is from Sergey, UR6QW. He was in Ukraine, and I haven't been able to talk to him yet, but he has a really great equalizer, and I like that. But then you got to set your bandwidth. See, a lot of guys don't understand that bandwidth thing. What do you mean? Every radio has either some form to switch the bandwidth, or you're stuck. If you have a Kenwood 520 or 530, it's 2.4. If you have a Collins K line, like a Collins KWM2, it's 2.1. Well, what does that mean? Well, see, that's the problem. You look at those figures and you say, what's he talking about? here's what we're talking about. Take a listen to this, and you'll be able to dissect what's going on here. There's, come on here. There's so much to learn right here.
This is K9EID, and we're transmitting at 2.9.
Come on, dude. You're not going to play for me? Well, what's going on here? Well, let me try that again. Because she works. She works pretty good.
This is K9EID, and we're transmitting at 2.
I wish I could show you that and let you hear that. Maybe I'll do that before we're over. Anyway, that wideband, if you buy one of our PR40s or you buy one of our PR71s and you put it into a 5, they call me up and say, oh, microphone's bad, it don't work. Well, no, it doesn't, because your filters are targeted it to do that. That's it. So you have to play with the bandwidth of your radio. And we need to look at all of that for the DXers. And a lot of guys, if you're not into DX, well, you're going to, oh man, that stuff's terrible, sounds terrible. No, it doesn't. Because all of the energy, now you got a transmitter, and we want to hear what? 2.5K. Well, here's a great example of all this. Notice, this is the wide setting, okay? And our power, if air was RF, it's disseminated between all of that. A little bit of rise at 2.5. But if you're DXing, I don't care about the low end. I don't care about anything above. I want to focus it on 2.5K. So now, where's all your power going? You heard how rich 2.5 is to audio when you're trying to make really good contacts. That's the story. 2.5K is golden, and there's just no way around it. And we build special elements for that, and we have been doing that since 1984. This is the contest dream machine, as I call it. That's in our Pro 7, and I simply I'm just in love with the Pro 7. I know I designed it and invented it, but I've had so many headsets that I play with, and we build a lot more, but this is it. The Pro 7 has answered a lot of you. A lot of people, they wanted a balance control, because if they're hard of hearing one side or the other, no problem. I also have really soft gels on this thing, so it looks heavy, but it doesn't feel it on your head. It's adjustable microphone. It has an interchangeable microphone. You want to put an Icon mic on this? You want to put a broadcaster's mic? You want to put the HC7's my favorite, and it works really great. Okay, what else we got? We got a plug right here for your operator or logger can plug into that. You don't need a bunch of Y cords. And then the all-important phase reversal. What in the world do you need phase reversal in a headphone for? Well, we're the only company, and we've been doing it for about, 13, 14 years. You go into a pile-up and you hear some little weaky guy back here. You reverse the phase and he comes up front. You can move signals around in your head acoustically. And it's just the coolest thing. And that is why so many of the DXers are using our headsets. We've been doing that for right at 37 years, and maybe probably a more. But they're all using the Pro sets and some of the other headsets. One thing about all of ours, we have a band of steel, so I read EHAM once in a while. Oh, that darn Heil headset. Well, you didn't read the instructions, buddy, because you can bend it and shape it to your head. You can't do that with others. They're all plastic. That's crazy. But I'm very, very rewarded that so many of the leading amateur radio operators and especially the DXers. They really like our stuff, and because we're building things for them. A lot of the things like the phasing, that was mine, but they tested and said, "Whoa!" And now it's been pretty much that everyone in the expeditions and so on is using that. Well, I know we're getting along in time, but I have to pay a little bit of attention to my favorite subject. What do you think that is? It's phasing. What are you talking about, Heil? Another one of those things that is not talked about. Understand it. We got all these guys writing all these hippy-dippy articles and all this kind of stuff, and the big magazines put out all their nonsense, and that's really what a lot of it is. What about things that mean something to us? I'm going to unplug this. I have two microphones here. Let me check the gain of these things. They get a little crazy. I have two microphones here. They're on a Y cord, meaning I don't want to fool anybody. We're not doing separate channels. They're all going into one channel. They all work exactly alike. These are PR22s that are designed for Paul Rogers, and it's one of my favorites because it's very articulate. So I don't have any EQ on this, and listen how good it sounds. Okay. When you double your power, it's 3 dB, right? Well, we're going to do that. Here comes double your power. When I talk into both of these, the meter will go up 3 dB. See if you can hear it. You got to listen now. 1, 2, 3. What? Close your eyes, maybe. I'm going to take away 3 dB. Maybe you can hear it better if you're really focusing on it. 1, 2, 3. No, you can't. The human being cannot detect 3 decibel unless you're in an echo chamber or something special. I just point that out just for the heck of it because it comes in play where you're doubling your power. Maybe you'd get more out of an equalizer and a proper microphone because you can get maybe 10 or 15 dB by doing that, over doubling your power. Okay, I have this magic little plug. Pin 3 is hooked to 2 and 2 is hooked to 3. It's backwards. It's out of phase. Well, it sounds exactly like that one. What's the deal? They're out of phase. When I bring them together, watch the screen and listen what happens. 1, 2, 3. Yeah, I'm talking, but they ain't hearing. They cancel. This one, the diaphragm goes down because it's in phase. This one comes up because it's out of phase. Together, bingo. They're not there. And so many, many things. I mean, I come back to some of these clubs and spend a whole hour on phasing. Do this. Yeah, it's happening more and more. We're coming back to the clubs and they focus just on one or two things. And I simply love it because there's so much to talk about. I always had heard about many, many things that using phasing, but they're, phased arrays and all of that. We can get into that. But one day, I was, again, sitting at Joe's table, kitchen table. We did a lot of work. He said, "Hey, Heil, you got to build me a microphone that I can get rid of all the trash behind me." The trash meaning the other instruments. Okay. Because none of it does. The RE20s, I don't care what it is. Doesn't make any difference. None of them have very good rear rejection. Even the $5,000 ones, sometimes they have no rejection. They're all omnidirectional. So, I built it. The PR40. Ooh, I gotta watch this. This thing gets crazy in the low end. This thing gets down to 28 cycles. No other dynamic microphone on the planet is able to do that. They stop an octave short. I did it because I figured out how to do it. I just drive my competition wild, and they are. They come to me wanting to know how I did all this. So my ham radio, man. They don't believe me, but that's okay. Go away. But you'll notice, if you've been noticing, I can move this anywhere, so it's got my front pattern. That frontal lobe is great. But watch and listen. When I talk into the back of this microphone, all other microphones are maybe 10, maybe 12 dB down. This one's, ready? 40 down. Watch. Hello. Oh, it's still working. Yeah, but it's 40 down. That is why so many broadcasters, Sirius Radio just bought 250 of these, because it gets rid of all that trash behind them, and they love it, and so do we. Well, how did I do it? I did it because of phasing. Every other dynamic microphone on the planet, they have 4 little holes equal around, little 1/8-inch holes. That's the only entrance for the rear rejection that we don't want. I said, that's not enough. So, first of all, it's 1 3/8. It's not 1 inch like all the other guys. I was able to tame it. And then I put it on top of what we call a collection tube in here. You know, a lot of the other mics, you talk on the side. No, you in fire, but look here. The whole bottom of the element's open. So I get 360 degrees around. That's why I have this incredible rear rejection. All the lows, the mids, the highs, they all come screaming up all around. And that's where we get the 40 dB rear. And I'm really proud of this microphone. It's showing up in so many places. Oh, boy. But phasing is amazing. And we should come back sometime and talk about some of that phased arrays and how you can build a phased array. It's very simple, very, very simple, and no problem at all. But we can get into all kinds of other things. How's the carrier deleted? When Wes Shum brought the single sideband to ham radio, and it wasn't Art Collins. Wes Shum at Central Electronics, he came in 1948 with single sideband and his 10A. And it was 6 years later that Collins got into it. But some idiot falls on top of your frequency, big old heterodyne. What do? You push the notch filter. How's that work? How do you get rid of him? Because took him out of phase. Goodbye, you're gone. And so that's how that all works. And just so much about equalization, and I love it. It's one of my favorite subjects, but gosh, I got a whole hour we can do on that kind of thing, and I do hope that sometime we can come back and do that, because we've got so many things. And of course, a lot of people ask me, what is your favorite antenna? Well, when I tell you this, no, not really. Yeah, it is. My favorite antenna is nothing but a dipole, and it's got to be right. It has to be resonant. Sometimes I'll put traps in them so this can be a 40 and 80. But you don't need to worry about standing wave ratio. So many things are wasted on that. If you have a dipole or an antenna that's resonant, you don't need to worry about it. And bingo. This is a marvelous antenna. It's flat on 40 and it's flat on 75 in the middle of the band. I just love these kind of things. But, from there it goes crazy. We'll come back with others. One last thing I want to leave you with is this guy. Coax connectors. This is how I do my coax connector. Remember that KMOX engineer? I hadn't been on the air a few weeks, and he taught me how to solder a coax connector because I had taken the handbook with me, and I tried to solder it through those little holes, and that was garbage because you don't know that they're all soldered. You can't guarantee that. And he said, no, here's how you do it. You, first of all, warm up the connector. You get that baby all cooking because it's going to be hot all the way around. Put it in a vise, wait about 15 minutes. Then insert the center and solder it. Now you got all those shields coming out. Cut them off. Leave about a quarter or half inch somewhere in there. And just solder them back, and every one of them you'll be able to see are soldered properly. I wouldn't show this to very many people because they'd make fun of me. I was a new ham. But I had the KMOX engineer teach me this can't be all that bad. Until about, what was it, 2016, I visited K3LR, Tim Duffy's multi-million-dollar contest station. Yeah, I did. Looking over in the corner was this bundle. There was 50, 60, I don't know, more than that, from all of his antennas. And every one of them were soldered like that. I'm going, whoa, maybe I wasn't crazy. And so from this day forward, that's what I do. And I did have this little gadget. DX Engineering just came out with a tool to do that. You just cut it off sharp, RG8 or 213, and it trims it down for you, and you're ready to go. It's really cool. So DX Engineering, they're the guys on that. They've got it together. But there are just so many more things. I could spend an hour and a half on the Pine Board project. You know, that came up in the last years of Ham Nation. And the last 2 years, I wanted people to build. That's my whole deal. I want them to build. Well, this was it. And we did it just like we did back in the olden days. Only it's these days. We built it on pine board or plywood or whatever. Some of the guys built it on breadboards. It's okay. But we built the power supply, a microphone preamp and equalizer, and a 2-band 75 and 40 meter transmitter, 5 watts. The diagrams are incredible. That's what made it go. They were just wonderful. W4IQN did all the diagrams. It became the lead article and won the cover award in January 2019. But I'm still having people build them because you can go to Antique Electric Supply, and they have everything there. They have a pine board power supply, pine board EQ, pine board final. You get all the parts from them. Can't buy the big coil. You get that from MFJ. Did you know that? MFJ will sell you any part. So, fun stuff. Well, it is getting down to where I need to get out of here, and you probably do too. But I got one more thing that's always bugged me my whole amateur radio career, and that is the receivers. I work for these companies. I complain to them. You only have 1 or 2 watts and it's 10% distortion. Yeah, we know that. Well, how come you don't publish that? And they don't. If you don't believe me, look at your manual. Tell me if you find anything about the audio. You don't. You find about all of the, it'll do this and it'll do that on 40 meters and RF. I said, we got to do something about it because it drives me insane to listen to a radio that has all that distortion. So what I did, I came up with what I call the parametric receive audio system. This is the speaker. You'll notice how big the magnet is. This is Paul Clips written all over it. We take that speaker outside in free air, find out what the cone resonance is, then build the box to meet that. So there's no phasing, No phase distortion. Your speaker hardly moves, not supposed to move. Balance line in, that's another hour we'll talk about. Balance line in, 600 ohm, and that's 25 watts. 25 at point 0.1. 0.1, we're talking hi-fi levels here. And so I'm very proud of this. It's done some wonderful things for a lot of people. There's the key right there. It has two headphone amplifiers way on the right. And those headphone amplifiers are separate. And they're very low gain. Very low gain. And a low distortion, am I right? They have about a watt out. And so we now have something that we can really use, because you can have your left side and your right side if you're hard of hearing, or the operator and the logger. Or if you're in a field day, the operator and somebody you want to listen. You don't need Y chords. We also have another one out. This is the record out at its own level. These are all separate amplifiers. Any cheapies try to do this, they wire them together. No. This, you put that into your computer through Audacity and make beautiful recordings. We end up here with 3 filters. The high filters at 6K, plus or minus. The low filters at 160 hertz. We'll roll that off a little bit. That's the output level, and this is the input. But what about the mid-range? It's parametric. You can change the parameters of this filter from 400 to 4,000 cycles. This is the gain of that filter, so we'll give it a little bit of gain, and we'll set everything pretty flat here at the beginning.
Sure enough, I can
These are made off the receiver, and here we go. There's how you hear that guy.
Echo India 8 Bravo, Lima Bravo, EI ATLB calling in by.
There it is, flat.
4 Sierra, Germany. I hope I have it right.
Here we go with 2.5.
Name is Lima India Alpha Mike, over.
Come back to flat. This is the way you hear him.
Echo India 8 Bravo, Lima Bravo, EI ATLB calling in by.
And there is no argument. This thing works, and it has helped so many. We're finding people are using them, including me, on my television. Televisions have terrible sound. I mean, they're just awful. And so I use that on my TV. I've got guys using them for their computers. Computers don't have very good audio, especially if you want to equalize anything. So it's been a wonderful product for us, and we're really thrilled that we can bring it to you, because nobody else has. They do all kinds of crazy things that they think's like it, but it's not close. But that's pretty much what I think we're going to end up doing later on. The country finally figuring out that is really a needable item. All of the things we talked about, pretty much all of them, are in a handbook that I wrote some time back called the Heil Ham Radio Handbook. Most all the dealers have it, or if you call our plant, you get their number on the website, Heil Sound. The ones in there I autographed. Don't charge any more money. They should probably take off $10 or whatever. But Heil Sound, a few years back, was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. We're the only manufacturer in the Rock Hall. The Rock Hall's all there for artists. But one day the curator said, you know what, these guys wouldn't be here if it wasn't somebody that pushed the buttons. And they started looking around at all the different sound companies, and Heil Sound was the one, because I'm standing in front of the only console that's quadraphonic. We did that for Quadrophenia, that tour, that album. And all the other things that you've heard, a modular power amps and monitors. We were the first to do monitors, the first talk boxes. The backside of that's got ZZ Top's mixer and stuff like that. I also was awarded an honorary PhD by Missouri University recently for music and electronics. And all of this stuff is, I gotta tell you, it's very honorable and very rewarding. But man, for a kid that just barely made it through high school. But I've always learned it from ham radio, and that's why I'm here.